Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I hope you are having a wonderful start to your week, that you had a good weekend, whatever that might have involved. It is Tuesday, and I am happy, as always, to have another author to share with you. Today I'm speaking with author Annette Valentine about her novel, Eastbound From Flagstaff. It's a novel, but it is based on events that happened in her father's life. So it's historical fiction, but it is based on some events that happened in her father's young life. It takes place in the 20s, and It takes place over about a decade, and the main character, Simon, has quite the journey. Let me read you the description of the book. Again, this is Eastbound From Flagstaff by Annette Valentine. Simon Hagen stretches his ability to successfully overcome the odds of defeat on an off-road of unexpected turns. From Southern farm boy to Michigander at the height of the 1920s, Prohibition lands him face to face with the mafia. Simon's saga takes him for a ride, and the bridge ahead is out. Given the love of his life and a career that is surpassing his dreams, Simon has control until he doesn't. Now, that gives you a snippet of what this book is about. You know that there's going to be, that he starts out as a Southern farm boy. At some point ends up in Michigan. There is the mafia. It's 1920s. We have Prohibition. Lots of stuff going on here, and yet that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the circumstances that Simon goes through in this story. He faces a lot of adversity, a lot of tragedy. In the end, though, it really is a book about forgiveness. It not only forgiving himself, but forgiving his father, forgiving or mending his relationship with God. It's not overtly, like a spiritual journey, but that's definitely an element of the story. So there's a lot going on within this story. And let's go ahead now and turn to the interview with Annette so she can tell us more about how this book came to be. Hi, Annette. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. I appreciate your inviting me to join you on the podcast. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to have you here. We are going to talk about your new novel. It's called Eastbound From Flagstaff. Before we get to the book, though, if you could share a bit about yourself for my listeners to get to know you.
Oh, I would be happy to. I am currently residing in a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee, Brentwood. I've been back here for 20 years after my husband's career took us far and wide, and we're back home. So we're Tennesseans living in Nashville area. I am a graduate of Purdue University in interior design and was fortunate enough to have a successful career as a professional interior designer. And in 2016, I sold that business, and since then I've devoted most of my time to creative writing. I do have another very important interest. I'm involved in the movement to end human trafficking, sex trafficking, and I speak to various organizations about human trafficking and sex trafficking. It's an atrocious reality, and I'd love to see it end in my lifetime. So I work very hard against human trafficking. I'm also a mother of 2 grown children, and they have given me and my husband 6 grandchildren, ranging in age from 21 to 12. So a handful of great grandchildren, or not great grandchildren, but they are great. And I'm a grandmother and a proud grandmother.
I guess with 21 to 12, and eventually you could be a great grandmother. We're not rushing things, but
Let's don't rush things, but it could happen.
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
I would give it another 10 years or so, and it could happen.
Oh, exactly. All in good time.
That's right. My oldest niece is also 21, and I'm like, or 22. She just turned 22, and it's like, yeah, okay, you're okay. Just keep going, doing what you're doing.
That's right. Yeah, everything is in its time, in its season.
That's right. That's right. So let's talk about the book. Again, it's called Eastbound from Flagstaff. Can you give an overview of the story?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Eastbound from Flagstaff is a historical novel. It's set in the 1920s and is a love story based on my father. And I had a pretty strong inspiration for writing the story based on my father. It's a background, the backstory, as I term it, of his life. And perhaps it's the secrets that made him who he was, Sarah, and also the realities of why he might have missed out on some of his dreams, or at least during that time period thought he had missed out on his dreams. So that's an overview. It's a deep story. It's got a lot of drama, and because of the time period, the Roaring '20s, it has a lot about the mafia and the places that he went and had to deal with the mafia and immigration prejudices of the times. And he had quite a circuitous route during that 10-year period. Took him all the way out to the southwest, and that's where the name Flagstaff comes in. So as I said earlier, it was a circuitous route from his rural beginnings in Elkton, Kentucky, and he left there when he was 18 years old for his life's journey, and was full and broad.
Yes. So the book takes place over about 10 years, and oh my goodness, I mean, there's so much that happens in this story. It's really quite amazing. I mean,
as an 18-year-old. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and there are tragedies in there, and I don't want to go into too much detail, because we want people to read the book, but it's a lot for a young man to shoulder and to go through what he did go through. So yes, I can definitely see how it would have shaped a lot of the rest of his life.
Yes, he did go through a lot. He had a lot of reasons to cower in the face of obstacles, but he learned to love life in spite of the fact that he couldn't control it, and that's a big part of the story.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about the main character, whose name is Simon. And what do you think about him? It seems funny to. What do you think about your dad? will resonate with readers.
Simon Hagen, yes, that's the name that I used for the man who is in part, loosely in part, my father. But it would resonate. Well, of course, we all have fathers, right? But this story is the relationship with his father that really comes out in Eastbound from Flagstaff. It's more or less the surfacing influence that tells its own story. I believe our fathers pass down a legacy to us, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. They do mold who we are, like it or not. And I think that relationship that we have with our fathers is so important. And so that relationship is what's going to hit a note or resonate with my readers, I believe. At least the ones who have had the experience of reading it so far have really seemed to appreciate what relationship comes out and the meaning of those deep relationships with family members, especially your father.
We're going to go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, Annette will talk more about turning a family story into a full-length novel. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you the Bible Study Podcast. Reflect and journey the Bible as together we study God's Word and be inspired. Bible study made fun and informative for all ages. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Bible Study Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with author Annette Valentine about her new novel, Eastbound From Flagstaff. Let's go ahead and return to that interview.
As you said, the book is based on events from your father's life, but it's a novel, so it's kind of a...
It is.
It's a historical fiction, but based on true events. So can you talk about the process of fictionalizing a family story? You know, how did that go for you? How did you decide what to fictionalize, what to keep? You know, what was that process like for you?
Sarah, I am not certain I actually did fictionalize the story of my father. And I say that because every scene was so real in my mind. The things that Simon, those things that I knew about him to be true, simply needed bridges, connections to fill that gap between the episodes. And those bridges became as real to me as if they were the truth. And I'll tell you a funny story. Of course, my family read it early on, and one of my brothers and I were having a conversation not too long ago, and we were talking about a specific incident in the story, and my brother, whose name is Joe, said, Annette, you remember when Daddy did so-and-so? And I went, Joe, that didn't actually happen. And so we both had a good laugh.
Oh, wow.
He had internalized it so much to the point that he was actually referring to the story as it being true. And, you know, that does happen. There are times when I've actually had to hesitate and go, wait a minute, I actually made that up. But it was a bridge. And
right.
so real that we actually formulated it in our minds as the truth.
That's funny, and I imagine that actually happens in families a lot anyway. I mean, not necessarily from a written novel, but we kind of tend to remember things that didn't actually happen or didn't quite happen the way we think we remember them. So,
yes, even with my children, we have that, and we call them warped memories because I say they remember things that did not happen, and they tell stories the way they did not happen. So we call them warped memories. So I think it runs true in most families.
I agree. In terms of the story itself and your father's experiences, how much did he share with the family about those experiences? Because he did grow up in a time where people weren't quite as communicative as they might be now. So how much of the story did you know going in?
So true. That's a great question. My father was a private man, I would say, and I think it went along with the generation that he was. He was a private person, but growing up, I did hear stories. I didn't know I was savoring them or saving them, either one. I didn't realize I was like a little bird gathering necessary ingredients, as it were, for my nest. Strings, the way birds do. They take strings and little twiglets, little pieces of so on and so on, and an occasional oddity for their nest. I once saw a bird's nest with a scrap of a candy wrapper, embedded in the nest. So in that sense, all through my childhood and young adulthood, I was gathering those twiglets for my novel nest, as it were, without even knowing I was doing that. So I knew the stories, some of them from way back, that I think I took every incident that I knew and used it somewhere in the story. So yes, they were all twiglets for my nest novel.
I love that. I think you should coin the phrase "novel nest."
Novel nest. Yes, that's an original today. That is an original.
Yeah, the gathering of those today. Little things that you've been. Yeah, I like it. So you mentioned speaking with your brother, and he remembered something that didn't actually happen. But how has your family responded to the book? Has it been mostly positive, or were they wondering why you wanted to write this book?
Oh, Sarah, it's been 100% positive. I think it has, how could I answer that, positioned our father in a not on a pedestal, because I didn't blow up or, improve on the truth, as my husband calls it. I didn't improve on the truth to the point that he's not a believable person. But I think they see the father that I saw. I mean, because every child has a different father. I don't know. I hadn't really even heard that term before until somebody said, my brother, even though we had the same father, they had a different perspective on him. So for me to create this picture of our father, I think it has been honoring. It definitely has been honoring, and I think they have all really appreciated it.
Well, it's definitely a wonderful tribute to your father, and kind of a different. It's a scrapbook in a way, but it's something tangible that you can have for your family history, which is really cool.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
There was a lot of research, though. I mean, there was a lot of research when you say you can pull things that are in your family and you can utilize all of these pieces of information and episodes that you have, but then you have to do the research. And when it comes to finding out everything that you have to know, there was a lot of that aspect of writing that I didn't realize I was going to be embarking on, and I loved it. I really like the part of writing that involves research, and there was a ton of it. Everything from learning about the mafia and the Purple Gang and old fashions of the Roaring Twenties and their attitudes, the mores, all of it, their prejudices, even the slang words that they used. And, you know, I have a Scotsman in the book, and he, of course, had to have a dialect, and I had to research that. So fun, all of that lingo. And then there were trains and automobiles of that period, the Model T in particular. Was just fascinating, and the Henry Ford industry, all of that, because Simon went to Detroit, and so there was a lot of that type of research that I had to do, and then architecture and just wonderful distractions, I call them, that accompany writing. They're rabbit trails, but I love that aspect of writing. So there was a lot of research that had to attach itself to the facts and the episodes in the book, all wrapped into one.
Saying I was just about to ask you about research, so you read my mind and you kind of did my job for me. But
oh, well, good. I like to be
nicely done. I wanted to ask you about the part of your father's journey that revolved around his faith. So he definitely had tragedy in the book. Simon has tragedy in the book, and he's very angry at God, understandably, from what happens. So how was that from the person that you knew? How was writing that journey and his coming to terms with his faith?
Yes, I have depicted him as being angry at God, and therefore he was angry at his father because his father represented God to him, and so they were all in one bundle. He was mad at his dad, he was mad at, or actually the reverse of that, he was mad at God, therefore he was mad at his father, and so he put up a resistance to both, and because of it, lived a lie. And I think, I'm not going to characterize people in general, but I think we can start believing something that isn't true, and it can dominate our lives and personality. And so from that standpoint, his faith was held at arm's length because he felt so guilty, and false guilt is just as bad as real guilt. It can be very detrimental to positive living if you're still clinging to something that is not true. So that's where Simon started out. He was running from a lie, and he had to learn to forgive himself. And once he did, he could forgive his father, and it opened the way to a relationship with God, but that never really is paramount in the book. I think he is very clear that his dad was somebody that he had to be reconciled with, and so faith is in there for sure, but it's more displayed in the form of him resisting God and what that, how's that working for you, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a little bit like Jonah. He runs a really far away. Only to
yep,
realize,
he landed, he was beached.
Yes, exactly.
And on that note, with me proving yet again that I'm kind of a nerd on multiple levels, we're going to go ahead and take another break. When we come back, Annette will be speaking about what actually prompted her to turn this into a novel. We spoke about how the process went of turning it into a novel, but why did she decide to sit down and write this particular story? So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
I want to talk to you guys about this amazing product I've been using lately called Hydrant. If you're like me and you want to kick the coffee habit, but you're worried about your energy levels depleting, to avoid the morning sluggishness and that midday slump, you need to make sure you're hydrated. It's super important. And that's where I've been using Hydrant. And for 25% off your first order, you can go to drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC at checkout. Hydrant is basically flavored electrolyte packets you mix directly into your water to make hydrating your body easy and delicious. And what I love about Hydrant, it's backed by research. The formula was developed by Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. Again, that's drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC for 25% off your first order. Another really cool thing about Hydrant, there's no synthetic colors or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan and you can choose between 3 different flavors or a variety pack. So for all my vegan friendly fellows out there, this one's for you. Again, this is drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Annette Valentine. We are talking about her book, Eastbound From Flagstaff, as well as many other topics. So let's go ahead and get back to that interview.
I wanted to ask you about, we talked about your inspiration for the story, but what actually compelled you to sit down and write a novel based on your dad's experiences?
To actually sit down and write it, I had a phrase from an editor that was not my editor, and not as if I fired him or something, but he had said something in his critique of the first book that I wrote, which was set in the 1940s. So it was a much different book, and when the editor was reading that book in particular, Simon was an adult man with a teenage daughter. So it was a totally different Simon Hagen at that point. And the editor, after he critiqued many areas of the book, he kept building up to this one phrase. He said, "I think Simon seems like a jerk." And I'm not even sure the editor knew that was based on my father. So for somebody to say, "Look, your father seems like a jerk to me,"
Wow.
you sort of put on some very heavy-duty defenses. So when you say sat down and started writing, I think I literally sat myself down on my bottom and said, "Look, I'm going to find the man that deserves my honor." And you know, that is how that book evolved. It went back to the 1920s because that editor wanted to discard all of the backstory that became the story of Simon Hagen as an 18-year-old and beyond for 10 years. So that's what made me sit down and write Eastbound from Flagstaff. It's like, how dare you say my father was a jerk? So it's a pretty powerful kick to say, you better write something that shows the world, in quotes, unquote, shows you that he was not a jerk. He might have had some things that prompted him to be a serious person, and here they are.
Right. Wow, that I'm just picturing you furiously typing, like just at the initial part of it, just sitting down and like typing furiously and pounding on your keyboard.
I can too. Those index fingers, just plonk, 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 plonk. Yes. That's a good picture.
I
love
it.
I love it.
So this was not your first novel that you had written. What made you when did you start writing, and what made you decide to start writing?
Well, I have written stories and essays and done a lot of journaling since I was a kid, really. When I was 11 years old, I can remember standing on the steps in my garage, and Sarah, talk about a picture that comes to your mind. I was standing there as a little girl, and I said to myself, one day I'm going to write a book. And then I can picture myself just turning my head and going, okay, if you're going to write a book, you better remember how you were when you said that. So I've always remembered that. I said when I was 11 years old, I'm going to write a book. But I certainly never envisioned doing that through my school age years. I, as I said, I like to write, and I got some recognition for writing. Published a magazine article when I was at Purdue in a journalism class, but I was majoring in interior design. That was my heart's desire, to help people through that avenue. And really, writing had fallen by the wayside. It never was blown up that big, but probably in 2000, I started writing a little bit, thinking in terms of a book. And I don't know, if you were to ask me the best advice I could give to someone aspiring to write, I would have to give you the best advice I had at that period in my life, and that was to find 1 hour a day and commit to 1 hour a day, the same hour of every day, and just write. Just do it. And that's what I did starting in 2000. But I had a full-blown business, interior design business, and a shop. And so interior design was 24/7. So I had 1 hour a day to write. And that's how I started writing a book. And when I retired from interior design, I resigned. Retired. That's when I started writing seriously and thinking, okay, this is going to be a book, or I need to come up with career number 3. But that was my motivation, just writing because I like the outpouring and the creativity of it. Interior design is highly creative, and so it's just another aspect of creativity that sets me on fire.
Wonderful. Thank you. And again, you did my job for me because you answered a question that I haven't asked yet.
Well,
thank you for that.
Mind reader again.
That might be your third career right there, a mind reader.
Don't count on it.
You also have, according to your website, a new novel, which is called Down to the Potter's House, coming out this fall. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, of course I do. I'm over the moon about that one, and would you believe that one's based on my mother? Now, there's a real character for you. She is going to launch November the 3rd, and the cover for that book, that's what I'm over the moon about. I love the cover. I have to give all credit to the designer, Eve Degree. She did an amazing job, and the sneak preview for that is going to be on my website on May the 21st. So that's a story set in the 1920s, as is Eastbound From Flagstaff. And that one also has all the thrill and intrigue of a girl growing up in that period of time. Plus, it has the dynamic of the Kentucky Derby and World War II, because it goes all the way up to 1940. So it has immorality and deceit, all those juicy things that keep the pages turning. But my books are clean. They could almost be young adult books. But Down to the Potter's House does characterize a wicked stepmother, but that book is in no way a Cinderella story. By the way, I've got to tell you, this is the second in a trilogy. So Eastbound, of course, is the first. That's my debut novel, Eastbound from Flagstaff, and then Down to the Potter's House is the second. And next year, 2021, will be the third one, which is called Sufficient Sacrifice. But this is a trilogy, and that's a whole series that I hope you'll be interested in, or my readers will be interested in knowing that fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So is that what you're working on now, is the third in the trilogy, or is that done?
I am. Mm-hmm. Actually, it is almost done. Hate to say being secluded in all these weeks of time has been a good thing, but if we have to make something good out of something that's not so good, which is being isolated, I can point to the fact that I've been able to write a lot. So yes, the book 3 is well underway, and I'm sure my publisher will be happy about that.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. We do definitely have a different reality right now, so you have to take advantage of it however you can.
And that's right.
In terms of when you take time to read for yourself, who are your favorite authors?
Oh, well, I like historical fiction, but I also love biographies. Right now I'm reading Undaunted Courage, which is by Stephen Ambrose. I've not read anything from him before. It is a great story on the Lewis and Clark expedition, has a lot of history about Thomas Jefferson. And I mentioned Laura Hillenbrand being totally absorbed by Unbroken, the story of survival, and Seabiscuit. That one I've really enjoyed. Pat Conroy's books, and then the historical fictions, Cold Mountain, The Scarlet Letter is an all-time favorite of mine. But more recently, All the Light We Cannot See. But some of the classics, War and Peace. Yeah, I like all kinds of books. Well, no, I don't like all kinds of books, but those are the ones the types of books that I like. Yes, especially historical fiction and biographies. Yeah,
I read Undaunted Courage. Oh, it's been forever ago, but I grew up in Montana, so it was really fun to read.
Okay.
That and get one of the history professors I had in college I think he wrote the foreword or something. So I had a moment of, I know him. Which
that's
makes me
great.
A total book nerd, but there you go.
It's a good thing.
Yes. So I mentioned your website. If you can tell people the website address as well as where they can interact with you on social media.
Sure. My website is simply Annette, ANNETTE. Got to put the H in there, AnnetteHValentine.com. And you can find all of my platforms on there, but I'm happy to tell you that Facebook is just Annette H. Valentine Author, all run together. Instagram is just Annette H. Valentine. So that should get you to any one of those platforms. I'm on Twitter and Pinterest, but Instagram and Facebook, and my website. I do blogs bi-monthly, and so you can pick those up there as well. Do all the fun things and wonderful things like follow me and like, and all those things that make you rise to the top, which is where I want to be.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that. And then we've talked about a variety of different topics, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to mention at this time in terms of your books or writing or anything in general that we haven't touched on?
Well, sure. To summarize, we've talked about inspiration and motivation and all the things that brought me to this point, even the best advice and so on. I'll have to say, and I'll be transparent here. I don't mind at all being transparent. If you were to go back in history, back in time to when I was a young woman, young adult, I was totally unmotivated and pretty confused. And I have to say, the best thing that I can say, I came to the point through a book, and right now I can't even tell you the author's name. Shoot. But through that book, it had a phrase in there, accept the fact that God loves you. And do you know, Sarah, that was a pivotal point in my life, to just quit fighting the fact that God loved me. So I simply started cooperating with that fact. And I'm certainly a motivated and highly motivated person now. And I attribute it to that one phrase, that pivotal phrase in that book that said, cooperate with the fact that God loves you.
Thank you for that. And actually, there's something similar in the book in Eastbound From Flagstaff. So I like that you, whether consciously or not, incorporated that.
I probably did. Yes, it's that little bird. That was one of those little candy wrappers in the Twiglet. I mixed amongst the Twiglets.
Yes, that's right. Well, Annette, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your book and also the fact that it's a trilogy. That's really fun. Excited to learn more about this story. So thank you so much.
Well, Sarah, thank you. It's been a pleasure visiting with you, and thank you.
Thank you once again to Annette for taking the time to speak with me about this book, about this trilogy. I'm excited to find out the rest of the story or more of the story. I know it's not the rest of the story when you're telling family stories because generations continue. So thank you to Annette. Thank you as always to you, my listeners. I so very much appreciate you. I hope that you are staying safe, staying well. Things are changing, but continue to stay safe and follow all the guidelines, and we'll get through this. Just a reminder, my usual plea at the end of the podcast, if you are a fan of this podcast, we would so appreciate it if you would follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you would share, like, retweet, do all those things that help us. But what really, really helps us is if you give us a 5-star review, if you subscribe to this podcast, and if you give a written review, awesome as well. So there's many things that you can do to show your support for the podcast. All of them appreciated, no matter what they are. So thank you very much for that. Hope you're having a great week, and I hope that this week gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.